Welcome to Steeped in Wellness, brought to you by Matcha.com. Here we spill the tea on wellness trends, personal growth, and the latest health news. Now, here are your hosts, licensed dietitian Diana Weil and medical journalist Laura Hodgevateris.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode.
We are super excited to have Dr. Aly Cohen as our guest. Aly Cohen is a triple board certified physician in rheumatology, internal medicine, and integrative medicine, and to top it off, a leading expert in environmental health. She is the founder of Integrative Rheumatology Associates in Princeton, New Jersey, where she combines conventional medicine with holistic approaches like nutrition, acupuncture, and toxin awareness counseling. Dr. Cohen teaches communities how to reduce everyday chemical exposures and live healthier, more sustainable lives. She is also the co-author of the books Non-Toxic, Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World, and Detoxify, Your Guide to Reducing Chemical Exposure and Optimizing Health. Dr. Cohen frequently lectures at medical schools and conferences on endocrine disruption, immune health, and environmental wellness, and she lives in New Jersey with her husband and 2 sons. Welcome, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you, ladies. Glad to be here.
We need you. Environmental toxins was always something that was like that I thought about. And then I had a kid, and I was like, this is terrifying.
It's terrifying enough that you can't have your favorite sushi, and I had to get that all cooked up every time I went to get sushi, or I couldn't have deli meat, or, there's a whole list, right? And then to throw this into the mix is really, great for your stress level as you're, stepping into this new arena. So, yeah, I mean, it's a big topic, but it's actually very manageable. And that's my whole work, is to really teach people that, yes, it's a big topic, but guess what? Here's some very reasonable ways to work on this and how you can reduce risk for a whole bunch of issues.
Aly, before we kind of get into, what are these everyday toxins that we're exposed to and how do we reduce them, how did you first kind of get interested in toxic exposure?
Well, similar to Diana's concern in the very beginning, I have an 18-year-old who just went off to college right now. So 18 years ago, more or less, I actually was very concerned about the world that I was living in and having young kids. But what really, started this whole ball in motion actually was that my dog got sick, and he was a 4.5-year-old golden retriever. And he got really sick, young dog, and he developed something called autoimmune hepatitis, which is just so unusual for dogs, but particularly golden retrievers. And believe it or not, because I was already practicing out of training immunology and rheumatology as my field, this was so shocking that I had to sort of do a deep dive into what might have triggered his immune system against him and create this sort of sickness that shouldn't have happened. So my heartbreak over my dog getting sick really launched me into looking at his water quality, his food quality, his flea and tick, stuff I would put on between his scapula, his back, and I would just never even wash it off. I mean, there was just so much I didn't know. And the more I learned about his exposures, believe it or not, the more I was learning about human exposures, and then that took off.
That is so interesting. I never even thought, I have 2 golden retrievers, and they are so deeply ingrained. Like, I love them, and they are my family members. And I didn't actually think about the ways our environmental exposures impact them.
Yeah. You have to remember, this is so long ago, and I assumed, like everyone else, even now, that everything's been regulated. Like, we are protected. Like, there's something out there that's checking ingredients of our cosmetics and lotions and creams and our baby products, and even our cleaning products that end up on surfaces and on kids with their dust and, on paws. I assumed very, naively that there was this whole rigorous, robust testing process, because why would it be on a shelf in the store and available to humans if it hadn't gone through all those processes? But it turns out that pretty much nothing in the products that we use are tested for safety in terms of ingredients, which is such an unbelievable shocker that it took me years of looking at all these papers and all the authors and contacting them and being like, are you serious? Like, is this real? And it really took me down the path, because once I started learning a lot, locally, I was giving local lectures because I just could not believe it. And then I started connecting with people like Environmental Working Group. And I reached out to them. I said, listen, I have slides and I'm educating people, but I don't know if I'm right. I don't even know if this is how these chemicals work in terms of, being hormone disrupting, even immune disrupting back then, but more so now. We have so much more data. And that's what I write about in my new book. But they were so surprised that a physician was interested in this topic that we start working together and creating CME programs for grand rounds. So I lectured at 23 hospital systems after a year of learning from them. They were like basically teaching me and sending me papers. The chief science officer was just amazing, Joanna Congleton. So the idea was that I had to learn what I should have learned in med school. I had to learn what every consumer should be aware of that no one does. And then I had to apply it to the medical community because there was no way I was going to get it to consumers at that point because I didn't know enough. So it was really this 16-year journey of figuring out how to understand it, be sure about the science that I was aware of, and then how to communicate it to people that I wanted to learn about it. And that was such a journey.
And just to clarify, CME, that's continuing education for medical professionals, right, Aly?
Yes. And CME is, continuing medical education, CME for physicians. And so that was my goal, was to really get into the minds of people that had a lot of reach. But then I decided, since none of these CME programs and grand rounds were really overwhelmed by what I was sharing, that I would go directly to consumers. And that was because my babysitter wanted to know more about my work. And I thought, this is it. This is the group. And so, yeah, I started doing high school teaching and pilot projects and got data for a TED Talk from Princeton High School that opened their doors to me. And so it all just kind of, came together.
So when we hear this word toxins, what are we really talking about? Like, what does that mean?
Toxins, actually, believe it or not, is not the real word for toxic. Toxic chemicals is a better way to describe chemicals that are synthetic, human-made.
Mm-hmm.
Toxins, by actual formal definition, is something that would come from a living creature, such as a
Yeah.
plant or a snake, or think snake venom, that kind of thing. But it's become sort of the mainstream way of discussing this topic, which is things that are not natural to the human body, right?
Okay.
So toxins is just a term we always use because people are familiar with it, but real scientists use toxic chemicals or toxics, just to give you the semantics. But
Mm-hmm.
basically, it's things that really, in terms of my work, is really, how did we get to this place where we have over 300,000 industrial or human-made compounds, and how do they go into all the products that we use every day? And who's vetting those chemicals, and where did like, how did it happen? So really, that came out of World War II. After around World War II, so only about 75 years, by the way, in all of human existence, which is a whole anthropologic, thought in my mind, is how did we get here and why are we doing this to our
Yeah.
bodies a short period of time? But it's really that we had this explosion of compounds for a lot of very altruistic reasons, right? We wanted to save on, materials like wood and stainless steel, and we wanted to protect soldiers after World War, from pesticides, from when they crossed into, from malaria. We wanted to make aircraft lighter with plexiglass. We wanted plastics to, not break dishes in the 1950s, right? God forbid, right? But we wanted to make life easier and convenience, but that was a problem because we were never, there was no regulations that really stuck in our history that required testing for safety or toxicity for these compounds that would go into these products that we use for everyday use. So that's how we got into this pickle. It's just we never set up the laws properly, and now we're sort of like, putting the genie back in the bottle years later, trying to get these chemicals to be mandated for safety testing before they go into the products. In Europe, they do a much better job of this. They've also removed lots of compounds that were found to be questionable or had the research to show that. So it's just one of those things that we're sort of behind the 8 ball, which is why we have to do it ourselves, and that's where my work comes from. I'm not waiting for regulation from anybody. I think we need to think about it for ourselves, and we can really do this.
Can you walk us through some of the issues that you see in your practice or are just aware of from these chemicals that we're exposed to?
So it turns out that many of these chemicals, and they're classified. Remember, 350,000 more or less is sort of a running number, but they're classified in different ways, either by what they're designed to do, such as like pesticides or solvents for paints and building material, those kind of things, fragrance. This way of classifying, and they're also classified by how they hurt the human body. So there's neurotoxins and there's liver toxins. There's lots of different ways to parse out those chemicals. But what's was discovered about 25 years ago, and really not even earlier than that, but around that time, was how many of the compounds that were being tested, and the first one was bisphenol A or BPA, which was actually removed from plastic baby bottles around 2012 from my co-author, actually, for 2 books. He was really largely responsible for gathering the data and working with colleagues on that. But BPA was like the first compound that was really found to disrupt hormones, and act as sort of a low level estrogen mimicker. In fact, it was found to do that, and it was utilized to actually fatten chickens. So BPA was actually added to chicken feed to make their meat bigger, to make them stronger, like whatever you want to call it. They were messing with their hormones to make them have more meat per chicken back in the day.
Wow, I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
There was lots of things that they used BPA knowing what it could do. And there was even medications that were used instead of BPA that were similar, like DES, diethylstilbestrol, that was actually given to women to prevent miscarriage in the 1970s. That was also found to be very much an endocrine disrupting chemical. So there's a lot of similarities in where these chemicals come from and what they're used for back in the day. But the fact of the matter is that was sort of like the first one to come out. And then they were like, well, how could this work? Because hormones actually work at teeny tiny levels, like parts per trillion, parts per billion, and they could have exponential effects, even very small doses. So that was a really big finding. And it went against the classic toxicology premise that the dose makes the poison, meaning like the more you're exposed, the more likely you're going to see a problem. Turns out that many of these hormone disrupting chemicals can work at very tiny doses and cause some of the same things that very high doses do. It was such an uphill climb for these researchers because they were really trying to show how compounds really can be problematic way below any testing that could be done on toxicity.
Poof.
When you, I know when you mention the BPA, the thing that comes to mind, Ailey, is something I've heard, and you can tell me if this is accurate or not. Is that in Puerto Rico, like back in the 1980s, there was this huge link to BPA being used to feed chickens to fatten them up, along with phthalates, which then led to an increased birth weight of females because it was affecting their hormones in the country. So now there's this ratio of there's a lot more women compared to men in Puerto Rico. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, I mean, they could very well. I haven't seen any of that work specifically. There's so much work now on this, which is so great because it's so much more empowering to know there's science behind the recommendations I make and others make. But here's the thing: hormone disruption. If you just go back to the title of that class, of endocrine disrupting chemicals and immune disrupting chemicals, because they can do both. It depends on the class and which chemical. But the idea is that you can upregulate receptors, you can regulate receptors, you can disrupt signaling between, say, one organ to another or one gland to another. You can do a lot of disruption. And when I had some of the, researchers on my podcast that were sort of the forefathers and mothers of this whole area of science, I was saying how amazing it was. They called it endocrine disrupting chemicals because disrupting kept the door open for so many more discoveries than maybe if they had sort of narrowed their labeling and kind of, lost their way. But disruption implies a lot of different things. And so, not to get into the weeds, because I want to get into solutions, of course, for your community, but I just want people to understand sort of the precursor problems that led to where we are now. Because back to your question, Diana, I'm a rheumatologist of 22 years, and I was really starting to wonder, why am I seeing so many people getting sicker with immune and autoimmune diseases younger, and also those with no family history? So these are sort
Mm.
of de novo cases of getting sick where there was no explanation that we could blame it on, a cousin, a mother, a father, or whatever as part of our genetics. because it turns out that these chemicals can actually have effects that change the proteins that allow these genetics to come out. So we can also, in some ways, really prevent that from happening. So food can do this. And, certain behaviors can change the destiny of our health because we now know the problems that got us into this are also something that we can affect with lifestyle and diet and just making smarter product choices.
Speaking of which, Ailey, I know they don't put the BPA in the chicken feed anymore, but you're really making me want to have steak instead of chicken for dinner tonight.
Yeah, I mean, look, everything in life, you're sitting here talking to me with colored hair, I highlight my hair for like 30, 40 years. My kids play lacrosse on really toxic turf. I've even done podcasts with researchers on, sports turf. Life is about, having flexibility. I've come full circle from being on the ledge to being, listen, I'm a mom, I work. Life is not easy. You have to work around all of that and do the best you can because it's really not about perfection. It's really about doing the best you can and making changes that fit into your lifestyle, understanding why to make them because I want people to understand the why before they do the what. But really, it's not about panicking. It's a process. I'm learning every day. I'm still learning every day about how to make little choices. I mean, I had a blender a couple like a month ago that I was like, why am I using a blender that's plastic? Like I've been doing this for 16 years and all of a sudden I look down and my blender is plastic. And I thought, you know what? I can get a $25 glass, Pyrex blender at the local supermarket, literally in the aisle. So the idea is that when we start to see things differently, we start to make different changes. So that's how I work on it. It's not perfection. It's a journey.
To me, I look at this world and I like shut down because I get so overwhelmed. And it seems like it's in our drinking water, it's in everything that we're eating. And we do exist in this world. Like I think Alara and I did an episode on this a while ago that we were talking about like plastic bath toys and you shouldn't have plastic bath toys. And I have plastic bath toys now, right? Because it's like, what else are you going to do? So I think, we removed BPA only to replace it with potentially more toxic chemicals. So how do we exist in this world and do our best and also not have a panic attack every day?
Yeah, so I created, your questions they resonate because I have patients who have never heard of what I'm talking about, all the way to people who could school me left, right, and up, down. You know what I mean? So I think there's just so much out there. But I will say this: the reason I wrote this new book, okay, was because I was practicing out the recommendations based on the science for so long that I had to say, I got to get this out there in a way that's reasonable. So, one of the things I designed for even students and other doctors that I train on environmental health is I came up with just a very simple 4 A's of environmental health navigation. So, it's called the 4 A's, keep it simple, stupid, right? So, the first A of the 4 A's of environmental health navigation is assess. And I've always believed you want to know the data, you want to kind of see what you're up against before you can make all those changes, right? So I put together a 50 question questionnaire, not judgmental, just very reasonable. Like, do you drive through city air? Do you dry clean your clothes? Do you look up your cosmetics for, any chemicals on any of the free apps? Whatever. You wanted to get a baseline of starting point. So that's assess. Then the second A is avoid or swap. So do we always need 20 different cleaners in our kitchen? I mean, we've been marketed to for so many years that we have to be so clean. We have a window cleaner, a door cleaner, a sink cleaner, carpet cleaner, you name it, a drain cleaner. It goes on and on and on. Why do we need all that when we could use vinegar and sea salt and lemon juice or even look up our products that we want? And not make them like I did back in the day. So the idea is avoid and swap gives you this flexibility of can I cut back where I can, save money, by the way, in doing so, and or do I want to swap out to things that are just safer versions of things I like? And that gives you the resources to do so and look them up from people who do this for a living that are vetted. The third A is so critical to not only detoxifying your body, which is the name of the book, right? Clean drinking water. How do we get clean drinking water, which serves and washes our body and has done so for millions of years? We're made up of 85% water, human beings. So I felt very strongly you have to get that right in some level, depending on what you choose. But thinking about what we add. So, third is add. So, adding water, adding great sleep, which allows us to remove chemicals, great science behind this while we sleep. So pushing the sleep hygiene, information. But exercise, sweating, sauna, mental health, how that works on the gut microbiome effects. The add is the piece that you can take all the chemicals in the world away, but you really want to add in things that make human beings thrive and have done so. And so that was a big piece of the add, plus nutritional components that actually offset some of those genetic and harmful effects of the environmental chemicals. So that's important too, which ones and how much and all that. The last piece of the four A's is allow. And allow was travel and kids and colored frosted hair and turf and my kids' dreams of being lacrosse, superstars. It's about allowing yourself wiggle room so that you can do maybe 80% right, at home where you can control the environment or your workspace. So you want to be able to have allow so that you keep moving on your journey in a positive way.
I think that kind of leads me to my next question, Ailey, which is, obviously there's chemicals everywhere. We're exposed to so many different things every day. It's inevitable, right? Like you said, there's going to be some things that we allow our children to play with. Like the other day, my almost 2-year-old was like screaming in the car. He really wanted my Poland Springs water bottle, which first off, I shouldn't have, right? But I was thirsty. I need to hydrate. I'm nursing. And I give it to him and he's just like crunching it in his mouth and stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, soft plastics. But he stopped crying. Like, so what are you gonna do?
It's survival, okay?
It's survival, right? So I'm just wondering, like, what are the top, most harmful things I should be avoiding that are very often found in like a typical household, or maybe I'll encounter on like a day-to-day basis. Like, what are the big no-nos if we were gonna do we really need to avoid this list?
Yeah, and I will tell you one thing that's important is that, if you're really struggling and people listening, and I know I sound like a kind of like a used car salesman, but there is a 21-day plan in here that is so like simple and it kind of cuts through some of the noise and fear. But I want people to know that that actually got a lot of attention, which I didn't expect it to, because people were just so overwhelmed that it was really helpful to have this 21-day plan, which is actually spread out through this assess, avoid, add, and allow. So you can kind of tie all those concepts together. But here's the thing, it's survival, in terms of just kind of pushing through your day, and making things work. So I would tell people that some of the big things that are the easiest things to do in general is that we buy less cleaning products, buy fewer, maybe fewer cosmetics and hair products, or you can simply look up the ones you really like and just get safer versions. I'll give some examples because people love this. Like I get massages occasionally. I'm stressed out. I need some massages, right? So I now bring my baby massage that I vetted on environmental working groups list. It's like a one, has no phthalates and fragrance chemicals. It has nothing in it that's harmful. And I just bring it with me and hope that they won't mind using something cleaner, right? A self tanner I grabbed a couple summers ago. That was a one. Things that make you, shampoo, conditioner, all of this can be looked up. But when I talk about taking in less to your home, when you don't buy as much junk, you're not bringing into your home where it actually makes its way around the home and then will make its way into our bodies. And this goes for, whether it's pets or kids or anyone, those chemicals don't really go away very easily. You want to get them out of your home by not bringing them in the first place as best you can.
Is this a bad time to mention Ilara's makeup and skincare fridge? It might be time to cull some of the ingredients in there, Ilara.
For the record, John, I do not wear makeup. Notice, Exhibit A, everyone, listeners, videos, I have a zit. I have not used concealer. I am a total, the most I do is eyeliner. But I am totally guilty of having, an excessive amount of face care products.
And you know what? You're not unusual. I mean, this is the product. I mean, look, I'm in my 50s and I'm seeing stuff to make me look younger. And you don't think that appeals to a human being, right? On some level, right? So, I'm just trying to say that there's a human factor in all of this, but we want to fight this urge to sort of just lop on stuff without understanding. Because essentially, when I talk to high school students, I'm like, you guys are sponges. We're all sponges. We absorb everything we put in, on, and around our bodies. Women, you might want to think about tampons and feminine care products because we're absorbing into the vaginal canal very rapidly because that's how we design medications. Same with our skin. We think it's okay to put like Dramamine and like, all these things on our body for medication purposes. But guess what? A lot of these chemicals in our cosmetics, cross that barrier and into our bloodstream too. So it's just a matter of getting kind of used to the idea of being aware and then acting on that in a very reasonable way for choices. But you said the top few things, don't buy as much.
Yep.
Thinking about drinking water, which is my favorite topic because it took so long for me to get a handle on it. Now I have a chapter on it so people really get it. And then, because water is such a big item that we consume, same with food. Personal care products you work through carefully. Get rid of things like nonstick pans that have PFAS, perfluoralkyls, because it's easy. You just go over and get a stainless steel one
The
at your
Teflon.
or,
Yeah.
I got rid of plastics. I talk about all these different journeys along in the book because I wanted people to understand how personal it was. I took a drawer of plug-in air fresheners that I had like 100.
Oh.
Oh, and I just tossed them all one day, like, it was so freeing, right? Or all the free back in the day, we used to get free samples from, like, all the big box stores like Macy's and whatever, and I had, like, an entire drawer of samples of junk, and I took the whole thing, and I put it all over the floor and took a picture of it, and then I just threw it all away. So, it just, takes a little motivation sometimes and.
I've gotten rid of almost all my hair care products, just so you know, Aly.
You know what's great about having young children is obviously we have all the stuff that's safe for baby. So then it got me thinking, what's safe for baby? It's probably safe for me. Like I probably shouldn't be using what's not safe for a baby. So I stopped kind of using all these more expensive and aromatic lotions, and I just use Aquaphor because that's what I use on them.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a really good thought process because even when I was looking for sunscreens for a while and trying to figure out that debate, I realized that the baby ones tend
Keyword, right?
very much so because I still look up everything. It only takes a second, by the way. And I have my students do it in their classes. They download,
Is
the
there
help.
an app that you recommend or website that
A
we
few of
could?
them. And again, these are a bunch of resources in the book, but Yuka, Clearia, Healthy Living is from EWG. You can do this on the go, costs nothing. And I have the students do this. They just download it or they pick up their phone and I take bags of like 100 different products and I toss it at all these kids and they just do it themselves. So once you get used to doing it, it takes 2 seconds and then you start to have a repertoire of what you like and then you can shop in like 2 minutes because now you don't have to be like all over the place. You can go into a supermarket, know exactly the products you like and what you want to eat or what you want to buy. It actually cuts down a lot of noise in your life.
And we'll link to some of those resources in our show notes as well.
Quick question about the app, and then I want to get into drinking water because I just drinking water is a big one for me that I haven't figured out yet. Do you for the app ones? Do you only go for ones that are like green or 1-2, or like what's your cutoff for like being an okay product?
Okay, so I try to go for ones and twos because the market is so different.
What does 1-2 mean?
Oh, okay,
also for
let's
those
talk
who don't even know, you guys are saying I'm like I don't know what 1-2
Okay,
one out
let
of
me-
100.
Great question. Great question. So, environmental working group, they're all different. Okay. But once you learn the rules of sort of that app and how they're grading the toxicity level or the harmful ingredients level, you get a handle for that particular app. So, Environmental Working Group, who I work with very closely, I'm very happy to work with them for years. They developed probably the first app and the first website. They've been doing this a very long time. So, it's called Healthy Living. And when you look up the products, and they have cleaning products, they have personal care products, they have food products, it will have a rating system where 0 or 1 would be the best, or they have EWG verified, which sort of is muddled in that 0 to 1, 2 area instead of giving you an actual number. But the point is that you can choose those, and then it goes all the way up to 9, 10, so to speak, okay, in terms of toxicity. And at this point, 20 years in, they have grown, I should say the market has grown for so many good companies doing so much good work. Whereas 16 years ago, you could not find probably majority of the stuff that I can get now, which is really great and gives you everyone a less excuse, I think, to do a little bit of work. So I always say, stick to 0, 1, 2, EWG verified for that particular app. Now, my son went to summer camp and he wanted to look really cute and smell really good for the ladies. Big summer. And, I said to him, listen, you either learn how to do this and find the products that you want, and you have to choose. I gave him 3 or below. I could have said 2 and below, but I wanted to have some flexibility. And I said, you You find those products that you want and you make a case for them and you can get them. And so then he became really good at it. And then he taught all his friends.
Ha.
The idea is that this stuff has ripple effects in the hallways of school, in the lunchroom. It's remarkable because then kids have empowerment, which is what I found from doing, the TED Talk and all the data collection. Kids want this. So even if the parents, you're learning and you're doing and you're going to train your kids on some level and you're going to show them sort of that influence, but they're going to be off on their own one day. And that's the kind of thing as a parent, at least in my world, that's kind of the greatest gift you can give them is the ability to have agency over their own bodies.
And if we can, as a bonus, get these 16-year-old boys away from using things like Axe body spray, that's a win for everybody.
Yeah, we all benefit. We all benefit.
And let me tell you also how it doesn't always work out for you. My kids ignore a lot of what I say. They jump in the car smelling worse than a department store. They are trading cologne, in the back rooms behind cars when I go to pick them up. There's like some kind of, let me tell you, there's all different phases and you have to decide what battles you're going to pick. I've decided that cologne is better than, crack cocaine. So I'm just really, I'm kind of weighing it out, arguably. But I will say that there's plenty of mom fails, parent fails. And I think it's just a matter of deciding how much you're going to fight and, push them so that they can actually make some of these choices on their own.
What do you say to like for men's deodorant, John, you talking about Axe body spray, just like, I feel like, okay, I want to go get one of these cleaner products, but they don't work as well.
Ah, good question. So
Do you have anything to say to that?
I deal with that. Like right now,
Right,
I have nursing BO. Like, and
It's
so it's like
stinky.
basically I just have to shower 3 or 4 times a day in order to not smell and also not have to put on a product that's like, has aluminum or something and it's going to put me at risk.
And before you ask, yes, I've used the same big brand deodorant that I've been using as long as I can remember, probably since puberty. So I'm anxious for your answer on this one, Aly.
Okay, so let's go back to the problem. So, say for instance, deodorant, it's always I use aluminum based all my life, right? I didn't know any better. I love the commercials. I think it was Sure or whatever it was.
Raise your hands if you're sure.
Yeah, all of the above. Pert. I mean, you guys are too young for Pert, but needless to say, all these different products that I grew up with, they smelled like new fallen rain and raspberry fields, and you were just, woo, you were taken with them. But the fact of the matter is that at least let's talk about antiperspirant versus deodorant. Antiperspirant was designed with aluminum in them so that they're tiny, tiny aluminum, so they get kind of pulled into your sweat glands and it keeps the water in the sweat glands instead of coming out to make you feel wet under your armpits. So the mechanical use of these micro pieces of aluminum were very effective at keeping people not to sweat. And then they threw on the phthalates and some of these fragrances so that you would not just not sweat, you would also smell pretty decent, right? So they were a winning combination for years. But it turns out that we don't really want stuff being absorbed into our sweat glands because technically that is able to get into your bloodstream, right? Your sweat glands are connected to your microvascular armpits. So you really wanted to move away from antiperspirant, okay? And there hasn't been a great copy of that process entirely. So at least that was a change when they started making deodorant where you could still smell pretty good, but you would still be pretty wet under your armpits. And as we speak, my armpits are not exactly the driest desert, but the idea is that you don't have that smell because you're using chemicals that have been using safer ingredients like baking soda combination. We actually have do-it-yourself for making your own personal care products in the
Oh,
book,
wow.
cleaning products. So it's like tons of do-it-yourself if you want to do that, as well as resources to look up the ones so you don't have to make them up. But they're really like 3 ingredients that are really in the safest products anyway. And that's the kind of the way to think of it is that we're never going to get a perfect system, at least as of yet. But I will tell you this, I came up with some good hacks. There are some tops that you can buy that actually have some padding in the armpit. And so I wear those with shirts that I don't want to feel too, kind of wet under my armpits and nice shirts and stuff like that. So there's always workarounds, but you have to kind of walk through them and see what's available.
So when I worked in broadcast television, Ailey, one of the things all of the on-camera talent did, because they're sitting there, millions of people are watching, they're sweating, lights, Botox injections in your
Oh,
armpits to keep you from
I want to
sweating.
talk about that too. And fillers. I want to talk, yeah.
Worse, worse than deodorant with
I'm not
aluminum,
a
or
Botox or
better?
filler person. I'm telling you this because as an immune disease specialist, I mean, let's go back to basics, right? Our bodies, we have not been here. I mean, we've been here 4.5 million years, and our bodies are incredibly capable of trying to protect itself. And the way it does that is through the immune system reactions. We're beautifully designed. People, we talk about autoimmune disease being an epidemic, really. It's rising remarkably around the world. Rheumatoid arthritis, 1% of the world population. All of these, Hashimoto's, rheumatoid, lupus, all of these are my bag, but I'll tell you, it's growing around the world. So when I tell you this, what I'm saying is that when you have foreign bodies in your body, there's always going to be a potential to have a reaction that's actually designed beautifully through evolution because your body doesn't want foreign bodies, which includes chemicals, and it can include some of these synthetic components. Medications can cause these things, right? This is why we have Stevens-Johnson reactions and anaphylaxis. There's that. There's also food components. But the idea is that when you're purposely putting some stuff into your body where there may be alternatives, again, this is a personal choice, you could experience an immune reaction because your body's doing its actual job. And so I'm always leery of that because when you talk about botulism, which is Botox, which is actually a toxin made from bacteria that we've known for a long time, right? We have cans. Cans actually have plastic interiors of BPA because it protects from having botulism from food. When you dent the cans, you can actually have a risk for infection. But, it's a natural substance, but guess what? It also comes with other components. There's other things that are brought into that formulation to make it last longer, make it work. So we don't know what those are. They're not revealed, right? So it's one of those things where I don't want people to feel bad about what they're doing. I just want people to understand that the immune system is actually designed to make a reaction to these things. Whether it's a big reaction or no reaction is really more genetic, and your makeup, your personal makeup. But I just don't want to chance it. And I have my own concerns about aging and other things that have to do with aesthetics, but I'll probably end up doing a facelift at some point as opposed to having things put into my body.
Yes,
Because I'd
yes, yes,
rather do
yes.
that at some point if I ever decide to do it. I wouldn't necessarily want to put stuff in my body that can change, its reactivity.
Have you heard about the growing popularity of they call it the lunch job, boob job, or like the
No,
24-hour boob
that.
job, where instead of going for proper boob job where you're implanting the silicone implants, it's like they go and just inject a ton of Restylane into your boobs to just like make them a bit more pert. I mean, it's already right bad enough thinking you're going to be putting, I don't know, however much in your cheeks, but just imagine, right, you're filling up your chest and that's just dissolving over years time, and then you're just getting these lunchtime boob jobs once or twice a year.
I mean, look, you know what I was going to say to that, but here's the thing. I was just at a baby shower, and every single young woman around those tables was like nose, face, skin. I mean, and to be honest with you, like I said, I don't want to judge because it's not my business to judge, but it shows me sort of how there's such a push towards aesthetics in such a way that 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14-year-old girls are getting Botox and fillers. I mean, it's really run crazy. And again, if we don't understand how the immune system works and connect that to what we're seeing epidemiologically in terms of how some of these chemicals work, they don't just work on the immune system potentially, they work on breast cancer risk. We know
Mm.
that chemicals and environment is the cause of 90% of breast cancer cases. Only 10% is a genetically connected cause of breast cancer. So when you're talking about young women being, and African American women, by the way, are, a much higher risk of having younger cases of breast cancer before even screening comes about. They have products in for Black women that are actually have placenta and some of the estrogenic chemicals we don't want to have on our skin and in our body. You're talking about a real movement we have to teach our daughters and teach the women around us that, there are health effects from these short-term goals of, feeling perky. No wonder bras for. I mean, come on, guys. This is what we did back in my day.
There's like a peer pressure keeping up with the Joneses aspect you're describing, Alien. It sounds like we need to sort of flip that on its head and create an environment where we're encouraging young women and probably all young people to not put these toxic chemicals in their body.
Yeah, or at least be thoughtful,
Yeah.
and it's not about judging. I don't feel that way because, again, I color my hair, so who am I to say that? But I will say that I think when we think about it, we often might have a second guess about doing some of the stuff we're doing to ourselves. And, I just would love people to feel better in their own skin. It's one of those things I hope for my own children, and for myself as I age, right? But I feel pretty good about it. I feel like, and I'm proud of seeing some of these actors and actresses that, are kind of carrying the torch on that. That makes me feel good. But it's also tied to a lot of what I know. And what I know, I don't want any of this stuff in my life. And I want to teach people how to make those decisions with the right information, not out of fear.
Okay, can we shift gears a little bit to drinking water? Because I don't want to not touch on this because it's such a big, like you said, we all drink water, and I've been going really down a rabbit hole on drinking water. So I would love to learn from you.
Yeah. So, fun facts I'll start with, and then I'm going to get you right to the point of what I think everyone wants to hear. So, first of all, in the United States, water is either tap water, right? Municipal tap, you get a water bill, it's coming from the municipal systems, or it's well water. Okay, so those are the big choices. 80% of the US water, humans in the US drink tap water. Okay, only about 20% really drink well water. And they both have different issues involved. Okay, but here's the thing, the tap water, the municipal tap water, there's about 160,000 wastewater treatment plants, as they're called, that clean our water. They follow a law from 1976 called the Safe Drinking Water Act, which hasn't changed in 50 years. And so we've had this huge amount of chemicals that are created for all sorts of products. We have sewage that becomes drinking water in those wastewater treatment plants. We have manufacturing runoff. We have air pollution that becomes water. We have, chlorination that's added, which needs to be added, or else we'd be back in the Middle Ages. We also have fluoride, which I would tell you is actually a neurotoxin without any fanfare. It's not good for the human body or particularly the brain. In pregnant women, especially, is something I would really like people to think about because I have all those studies in the book. But the idea is that when you take municipal tap water, it's also traveled maybe 10, 13, 15, 20 miles from the wastewater treatment plant to your home. And that's PVC piping, which is the replacement for lead. That's old lead piping. That's any breaks in the piping that, I live in farmland, so I always worried about pesticide breaks in the piping. Needless to say, here's the punchline. Whether it's well water or it's municipal treatment plant with all its issues and laws that are old and outdated, you're going to control the water quality when it hits your home. Because when it hits your home, it doesn't matter whether it came up from a well. It doesn't matter whether it came from a wastewater treatment plant. You're going to control that at the point of use. So, what I'm recommending people think about, first of all, any filtration, whether it's a pitcher, which is carbon block, or a refrigerator door, which is a big carbon block, water goes through quickly. Or what I really have people think more about is called reverse osmosis, because reverse osmosis, which is now very much available at a very reasonable price, $275, you can get a really vetted reverse osmosis water filter, um, very reasonable and worth putting in because they last longer. They don't have as many expensive replacement carbon block filters like you do with the pitchers and the refrigerator door. They take off more stuff that you don't want in your body, including mostly fluoride and some other stuff. But it really, they work the most, the best. And reverse osmosis is now available to the masses. It used to not be. In fact, they use it for dialysis. My dad's a kidney specialist and he's still practicing in nephrology. They have an entire room, which is a reverse osmosis room for these patients who are on dialysis because they have to really clean the water. Us mere mortals, not dialysis patients, we get to have the benefit of 15 years of innovation. Now, I even bought one for my son up at college, which sits on his countertop. He doesn't even have, I have mine plumbed and same here. Like we had a plumber comes in an hour. That's it. Takes an hour. No big deal. But he has one that's on his countertop. You could put toilet water in the back for anyone cares. And it cleans the water so well that the front makes a pitcher of water in like 2 minutes. It's so cool. It's so cool.
What's the specific mechanism that you got for your son? I'm interested in knowing.
Oh, that's reverse osmosis too. So here's the thing, reverse osmosis, I'll explain what that means. The water has to go through a lot of different materials to clean it up, right? You got like large particles, you got small particles, then you have teeny tiny particles you can barely see. Reverse osmosis is a material that the pore size is so tiny that it catches everything. It's a sieve. It just catches everything. In the old days of my dad in dialysis back in the 70s, when they were first designing it, it was really designed to keep single-celled organisms like bacteria, mold, yeast, and viruses from making those patients sick because they're the most immune compromised and sickest patients, right? They have no kidney function, so they have to use machines called dialysis machines, which are great. So the original RO filters that were huge were really designed so small to catch those single-celled organisms. It turns out that all these compounds and chemicals that we've made since that time are bigger in size than those. So now we get this, miracle that we are catching all of this junk, in that reverse osmosis filtration material. And that's the beauty of it, is that it's just designed to catch more junk. And you don't have to know what your junk is for your town. I don't encourage a lot of testing anymore because it's always going to change, whether it's your
Yeah.
water, your town, whether it's your blood. Believe it or not, I don't want people to spend money on testing. I want people to actually spend money on the solutions.
There's a big movement, right, of labeling everything as toxic. And that's become a very trendy word. And because of it, I think that the larger medical community has lost a lot of trust because where things are outdated, we're following old guidelines. There are a lot of doctors who maybe aren't aware of this stuff. What do you think the balance is of being aware of this stuff, educating patients, but also how do we gain, still keeping medical professionals respected because there is a lot of education that goes into being a doctor. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, this goes to why I went into integrative medicine. Okay. That's the punchline here, is that we're missing so much great science in our medical school training, in our healthcare training for healthcare professionals, not just doctors. We're just missing this huge piece of environmental health, how environment plays a role on human health in a variety of ways, metabolically, sugars and different hormones that affect different processes. Weight gain is connected to a lot of these chemicals or inability to lose weight. They're called obesogens. But the point is that we're missing so much great information that I had to learn outside of my traditional training, just like nutrition is often left out in any big way, right? We use like 5 to 10 hours max in any modern day medical school training, which is a shame, right? So I think what I'm navigating myself personally is trying to train doctors. Right now, I think there's 4 programs that I'm educating on environmental health, which took years to get into. I'm trying to do my best in my lane. I'm talking as a rheumatologist who's Western trained, who uses all the medications in the same breath as, guess what? Maybe we want to consider changing our water filters or less cosmetics or it's all tools to helping the human body thrive. So to your point, I think the trust issue has become a big problem because patients are becoming savvy. They have more information than they've ever had, and they're really asking for questions and answers. Answers to many of their health conditions, also preventative questions, and they're not really getting that information from the people they're supposed to trust the most. And I think that's where we run into problems because if we could just train people better, then they would have that information to share. Otherwise, they're going to go to influencers that I might not agree with, or they might go to TikTok and have everyday people talking. And then we get into a whole bunch of stuff that has to do.
Everybody's a doctor on TikTok.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's worrisome for me because we're getting into real issues, like
Sure.
measles, and we're getting into Tylenol being bad for pregnant women, which is we know that the least amount of medicine over the shortest amount of time to do the great, to do the effect. And that's what I was taught. I was taught least, but when you have a fever and you're pregnant, you need to take something to get that fever down, or else it can be really harmful for the fetus. So it's, again, being judicious about everything is the way to go, is just be judicious and consult doctors and really think about the science. But yeah, I mean, it's a problem. That's why we have to fight back with more education, like podcasts like yours, I hope. So this is how we do it.
So I know there's a lot of doom and gloom, right, on this topic. But as we round things out in the podcast, what gives you hope about the future of environmental medicine?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm telling you this because the trajectory of this material has really escalated to the point where it's, like I said, we have a lot of integrative medicine fellowships, even functional medicine fellowships. I literally have 4 doctor programs of people who, beyond medical training, have now vested their time into learning more about nutrition and environment and Ayurvedic medicine and traditional Chinese, all these different ways to heal for the human body. I am hopeful because it's far more movement I've ever seen in 16 years of doing this. I'm very hopeful that, kids who are now empowered, who are proactive, who know how to look products up, they're just going to blow all their parents away in terms of what they're able to do that their parents might not have bought into because they sort of had that window where they're in between, generations. So I'm very hopeful. And the more I teach high school, the more I see these kids just, they get it. They really do get it. So yeah, I'm actually a lot more surprised to be hopeful than I thought I would be. But then again, I believe in empowerment. I believe us, as an individual, we need to start to think about how to work on these things as best we can on our own, and to ask the right questions, but to get the right sources and the voices that matter and are educated on them.
Well, it makes me feel hopeful that you are hopeful. So thank you for that and all of the information that you've shared. So we like to end our podcast with 2 questions. And the first one is, what is a life lesson that you have had to learn the hard way?
God, a life lesson. Um, all right. I would say, look, I think people can change. I used to not believe they couldn't. And I had someone who bullied me in 6th grade who I never got over. And all of a sudden, they're one of my biggest supporters. And it brought me to, and I teach this to my kids, like things like this, is that, I really believe that people can change and I want to give them benefit of the doubt. So I'm always looking for the good kernels in everybody. I think everyone has something to offer. And I have to hang my hat on that because I like to believe that people are good innately. So that keeps me going to do the
I
work I.
love that. Well, and I feel like that really ties into your last answer too, where this is a doom and gloom topic and you do have hope. And that's obviously you have a positive outlook on life, which I think is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I do because my kids are full of humor and they have their lives ahead of them. And, we're still here. When you're here, you got to enjoy life. So I think, cut off the noise and the negativity, stay with people and hang out with people that bring you up, be educated enough to not be fearful. There's a poem called the Desiderata. I don't know if you guys have heard that. It is the poem I live by. So if you get a chance, it's everywhere. It's been around forever. But when you get a chance, look up the poem Desiderata, Desiderata. And it's just a remarkable, I look at it all the time just to remind myself why we're here, what to think about, and put it all in perspective. So I hope you'll check it out.
No, it sounds incredible. It kind of honestly is almost an answer to my follow-up question to Diana's, which is kind of like, is there any sort of mantra, saying, poem, something that is inspiring you at the moment?
Yeah, that one is always, it's forever. I even copied it and shrunk it and keep it in my wallet. But Serenity Prayer, we've heard of the
Mm.
Serenity Prayer. And of course, I'm trying to think of, have the courage to know what you can change, the something to die, and the wisdom to know the difference, so that you spend. It's actually, I used it for my second book, Non-Toxic, is the poem in the front. But the idea is that, we have to use our energies wisely, right? You guys are new moms. We got to be thinking about, how do we use our energy wisely so we don't burn out on any level, work, family, anything. And the idea is to know the difference between what worrying is going to do for you and where you could put that positive energy into things that are going to be more healthful to you. So I'm a big fan of the serenity prayer. I think it applies to everything, especially now when everyone's stressed out and we have so many world problems. I think it's a really good way to bring perspective back into our lives.
Couldn't do it from memory either, so I Googled it while you were speaking, Aly. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Aly, this has been incredible. Thank you so much. I personally feel inspired to go change my husband's deodorant, which is the classic smelly, what's the one that all men wear,
Old Spice
Yes.
has
Yep.
commercials with the
Yep.
yeah,
He wears
but
those.
there are ones that are lower in toxicity.
Salt and Stone.
Oh, okay. I have used Salt and Stones. I'm going to go switch it out. But can you tell us where people can find you?
Yeah, so people can find me. I'm in Princeton if you're interested and you want to be a patient. I mean, I'm here in Princeton, but I also do telemedicine. So that's alycohenmd.com, ALYCOHENMD.com. But the Smart Human is my baby, my third baby out of my two human babies. So it is on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. The Smart Human podcast, thesmarthuman.com has all my recent posts, newsletter, and also the Smart Human Academy, where I'm posting a bunch of really cool courses for people. So it's really become, my educational gift, my baby. So that's another place to reach me. And I hope people will follow, because I post nuggets of kind of useful information. Nothing negative. I should say nothing negative. Nothing negative without a solution. I'm all about give the information, but always post with a solution, or else I don't really post on it if it doesn't have a solution.
Sip, savor, and live well with new episodes of Steeped in Wellness every Wednesday. Follow our show for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. Leave your questions and comments below. Find us on Instagram at Steeped in Wellness Podcast, or for more, click on matcha.com.